I am Dr. Uday Kumar Reddy, the Dean, School of Engineering at Dayanand Sagar University, Bengaluru, India. What is interesting is the student is not at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, not at DeepMind or OpenAI, but she will be sitting and she'll be working on the AI factory at DSU. Now, the product is not what you think. The AI factory, by definition, it produces AI capability, the compute, the models, the technical foundation that it can run, built and run on various applications. So that is what exactly this AI factory produces. But the DSU AI factory is building something more. And that exactly, what exactly that the product is, probably I think I will tell you in the end of the talk. Now, before that, let me also tell you what exactly the factory is. You know that every factory in the history is produced by, what is producing everything, but not what is there inside the machine. For example, if I take the automobile plant is not defined by its conveyor belt, but rather it is defined by the car. The DSU AI factory is not defined by the engine that is AI factory, but it is defined by the product, and the product is not what you think. So let me also talk about what the world is producing, the world factories. Now, let me also honor that what the world is building, the data centers, that the size of that is city blocks, the GPU clusters consumes enormous electricity of small nations. The kind of models that are trained is more or enormous, more than any human being that they can study in their lifetime. So the world is building such that it is completely extraordinary. And at the same time, I'm not saying that what the world is building is wrong, but it is incomplete. And that incompleteness is the consequential gap in the history of engineering education. And that gap is what is called, that I'm calling as a product. And again, I say that the product is not what you think, and that I will take you in the next coming, subsequently in the talk, in the production lines, how these products are produced. And therefore, the most important thing is the behind of the entire what world is building is the engine. Now, here, all of us know that the entire AI, what the world is building beautifully across the entire nation, the globe. there is something called, we call that as an AI factory because it produces continuously on, 24 bar 7 that can be produced by training a lot of models. But then there is something called the engine that can produce and the engine that cannot produce. That means what it can produce and what it cannot produce. Absolutely, it can produce large language models. It can produce, it can run a lot of computer vision related at the scale to recognize various things. And I think it's already known that based on the deep learning and so many other technical stuff, and it is possible today. And what is not possible is the product that is something very useful for the world. The engine alone is not possible to produce. And therefore, let me explain this. What exactly these products, what I'm talking, how do we take up that? And I will explain you that through the production lines. Let me talk about on the production line 1, the augmented reality, virtual reality, extended reality. In the form of, AI is generated in the form of a real-time, environment generation, the intelligent design scenario, or physics simulation. And if you combine it with something, the AI, it cannot supply for itself, that is for the AI, because it is not able to understand the whole objective function. So what we are trying to do here is, in this center of excellence in AR VR, the students are not only studying engineering, or not just studying engineering, rather they experience it. Now that is one form of the AI. The second input, what is required to produce a real, useful product, is, let me take an example of human being, a student, standing inside the bridge. Let's say an example of bridge that is about to collapse. Now here the student can see the formation of the cracks, and a student can hear the failing structure, and the student has only 10 seconds or less than that to take a decision, and that decision is something not possible only for the engine. So that is where the human is very, very important, and that is the second input. Therefore, what we are trying to produce is not the engineers who can, not just the skilled engineers that we need to produce, we need to look at who can understand the consequences. So that's the product. Now, let me take you one more. I'm taking the production line so that you have a clarity what exactly is all that product is all about, and then how it is useful for this entire world. In production line 2 is the AI and robotics. Here the students will not work on the machines, rather they work with the machines. And again, imagine this. A student standing next to the robotic arm. It's very clear that the machines are so fast, very precise, and tirelessly it works. But then the outcome is not what we think. An outcome could be harming people because the machine does not know what exactly it is trying to produce. And it is simply following the instructions. Therefore, it is very important for a human to understand that apart from the input of AI, how a human intelligence also should play a very important role. So what I'm trying to say here, the product here is, we need to produce an engineer not to compete with the AI, to challenge the AI saying that it is wrong. Because the goal might be different earlier, and now I need to change the goal. So that is where the human intelligence plays a very important role. And that's the product. Production line 3. Very, very important to, I think it's very clear from this cyber range. Let me take this wonderful example. Now, if I take this, assume that a lot of cyber attacks that happens live and thousands of cyber attacks happens per second. The missions, a lot of probing will happen, the exploitation, a lot of things will happen over there. And remember, the AI is on the attacker side. Now, that is one part of input. The next part of the input is, assume that the student is sitting in a room on the defending side. Now, what happens is, or let's also assume that the systems are flashing, the alarms goes off. Now, the question is, the system do not know, the truth is the system do not know what to do, because the learning that has happened based on the past cyber attacks or the algorithms that was there, but then the cyber attack that is happening is current, live. So that is where the second input comes. Is now I ask a student, what do we do? Now student says, yes, we can decide that even without a complete information. Because if I wait for a certainty, that is a big mistake, because it takes a lot of time. So therefore, any human who will be able to act even with incomplete information is called a judgment. And that judgment will operate faster than any algorithm that is available. That is a product. So the product here is the judgment that operates faster than any algorithm. So that is very key for this production line. Similarly, take one more example in the production line AI maker space. Very important again. I think all of us, we know that every student or any human being works with generative AI. Now, it's so fast, whether the text to generate or the images to be generated or whatnot, it takes just seconds to generate that. Once it used to take days together to generate. So the key is, the most powerful work one should remember is the student. Now, when I refer the student, basically a human in general. So here the student has to come up with what is called a clear question. Unless the clarity of question or the clarity of what needs to be asked to the AI, I think the purpose is not solved. So the key is again, the AI is so powerful, but the student brings the purpose. So therefore, the product, what I'm trying to correlate here is, it is that the student should have a clarity in terms of the question, and see that the student is not, because student is not accepting the first answer, therefore rebuild or reshape and so on and so forth until the student is satisfied with what the answer is given by the AI. So therefore, the human intelligence plays a vital role here along with AI. So that is where the input 1 and input 2 that produces something useful product. So the AI gives the power, humanity gives the direction. That is the key. The last, which I wanted to bring in as an example of how important the human intelligence is, the maker space. It is a room where the you have wood, metals, or wires, and whatnot, everything in the human hands. So here the question is, I think many of the some students or some of them ask the question, now when you have a beautiful AI environment, now why do you need this room? Why do you need this room? But the question is valid, absolutely. But then what happens is, now if any student who is trying to build anything in the room does not always work, and therefore it has to be refixed. Even if the design fails, the circuit burns, and so many things that happens, finally it has to build. I mean, it has to be refixed. And as I said, the AI, the complete environment is very clean. You have beautiful, neat, clean environment, everything. But the question is whether the world in reality, is it clean? No. In reality, the world is different. Therefore, anything that is built by the student or by human in general will lead to, eventually it meets the reality. And that reality is the final say. And therefore, what we need to understand, the product here is what it is not that an engineer just creates the system, but rather who can understand those systems that is useful for the real world. So that is a product. So that is the key. So therefore, with all those production lines, I think now the product is very clear, and the one who comes out with that judgment, with that curiosity, challenging the AI system and many other which I mentioned now, and that engineer is a product, and she is the one who has got or who has recognized in the globe. The operator, yes, I think we have seen the overall what exactly the meaning of the product is. So arrive with a question and use both the inputs in general to produce a AI square product. What is that AI square product? Okay, again, the product already and you know what exactly the first input is AI, second input is the human intelligence, and therefore the product is multiplying both the artificial intelligence and then the human intelligence. And the question which I was, the story that which I was narrating, all the 5 different production lines, whether it is weight of consequence or the judgment or arriving at the right question for the AI and many others, that is nothing but your authentic intelligence. Critical thinking. So that is authentic intelligence. So it is an intelligence that decides what is worth in the first place. So therefore, what I say at this forum is very clear that we should not only depend only on the engine, rather we should also get along with that, with the engine. A human intelligence should work with AI, artificial intelligence, and then the product, a useful product can be generated. So otherwise, working separately with AI, working separately with human intelligence will not be a useful product, and that's the ultimate product. That is why we say it is not added, it is multiplied. Okay, so therefore, the what we say to the world is produce the AI square engineers. An engineer who has got both the intelligence, both the AI intelligence, I mean that is artificial intelligence, how to use it, and then how to question the artificial intelligence, which I narrated in the previous stories. So the future, the world is producing a lot of AI factories, but here can we produce AI square factories rather than just AI factories? So therefore, the important thing here is an intelligence that has got, as I mentioned, today every university or every one, whether it's industry, it is in academia and whatnot, we are in the race of AI. Can we also say that can we also build the race of AI square, build along with AI a human intelligence that can be very useful for this nation? Because we have heard from top CEOs of AI, they themselves have mentioned very clearly, it is not that an engineer should not only build the AI systems, they should also look at the responsibility, the safety issues, and in general a human-centered approach or human-centered AI solutions rather than just believing in AI with the blind values. So finally, what I would like to say here is, as I mentioned again, to summarize, the world needs AI square rather than just AI, and therefore the intelligence that what we produce, both the artificial and then authentic intelligence, is something which is required to not only the practice, to practice, also to manufacture, to in the places wherever, whether it is in the university and then to the industries and then to the students or whatever, whoever that we are operating on this engine. And before I leave this stage, I would like to just ask a question. What is your factory building? So I think I have made everything. Now I think you know very clearly that I have narrated in the beginning, we are building an AI factory. The product is not what you think. Is where you need both artificial intelligence plus authentic intelligence to make a useful product for this entire world. Can can we make something useful for whatever product that we generate? Therefore, with this question, what is your factory building? I leave at this stage and say thank you.